Hi, nice to be here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I work in PG Ventures, as Scott said, and it is an internal startup studio within Procter & Gamble. What I thought the best way to do to start a discussion is I'm going to show a short video that gives a really nice overview of what Ventures is, and then Scott and I are just going to have an informal discussion, and please feel free to chime in, ask questions, and we're just here to share. So with that, I am going to be technically savvy, and hopefully this will work.
PGV is an internal startup studio within Procter & Gamble, and our purpose is to be able to partner with entrepreneurs who have great ideas within the key categories or spaces that we're looking to work in.
As we work with entrepreneurs, one thing that P&G Ventures brings is all the infrastructure that comes around with P&G. Everything from supply chains to R&D, regulatory, branding, communication, endorsements, things like that, because we have been around 180 years across many, many categories, we have a lot of relationships and a lot of skill base. And making that accessible to entrepreneurs is really where we think the magic happens.
Procter had all of the capability necessary, this deep and comprehensive expertise in doing this consumer product development. And so one of the things that happened in this partnership is they were able to help us understand where are the gaps. We as a team started to recognize the gaps, and then they leaned in with intense level of expertise to start to fill those gaps.
PGV brought in so many great resources for us, and they just supported us through the whole thing. They had specialists that knew exactly what to do. It was really incredible, and it just took everything to a whole new level, somewhere we didn't think we'd ever get.
There's a lot of stuff that we've learned how to do well because we're great at it or just because we failed at it. And there's a ton of things that entrepreneurs just shouldn't have to learn if they've got the right partner. When it comes to filing patents, when it comes to regulatory navigation, when it comes to how do you sell into a Home Depot or a Target, that's stuff that we do every day.
Well, without partnership, I don't think we could achieve changing the market. It's just not marketing and getting into retail, and it's just not technology that really works and solves a consumer problem. It's the marriage of the two.
One thing I love about this job is watching dreams come true for entrepreneurs. They have passion and energy, and they are determined to solve a problem for a consumer. And a lot of the issue sometimes is the how. And being able to see the products on shelf and see it in Target and Walmart or online, seeing those dreams come alive for those entrepreneurs and for P&G Ventures together as a partner, that makes for a good day.
Okay, so what you can see is, I don't want to go anymore. What you can see, what you can see is P&G Ventures is not a typical, it's not a venture, it's not a VC, it's not a funding mechanism. What we do is we partner with early stage startups and we provide, there's always some money exchange, but we provide other things that they lack, like manufacturing, supply chain, quality control. And that has been a really great model for us in the last 5 years. And this last year and a half, we've stood up 4 different companies and they're all into growth phase. So it's a little different than a typical corporate venture arm.
Thanks, Lauren. That video is a great way to get this conversation kicked off. And how long ago did you start? And can you tell us a little bit about what caused you to form this arm?
Sure. So 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, P&G was in a really weird place. We hadn't recovered very well from the economic downturn, and we were not growing. And I don't know if people follow Procter, but we had a CEO exit and A.G. Lafley had come back. And despite our desire to actually divest a lot of smaller companies, we decided we also needed to grow and really focus on what we're good at doing. And that's creating big billion-dollar brands that serve people in ways they aren't being served today around the world. And so Ventures was formed. It was an evolution from NBC. new business creation, and we got very, very focused on what we were doing. New business creation, we were kind of outside of our wheelhouse. I was in NBC new business creation for a while, and we did things like new units that were sold across the country to pseudo dry clean your clothes at home, or other things that really weren't in fast moving consumer goods, which is where P&G really does excel. And so we focused back there, but we focused in areas where P&G does not currently serve the consumer, like aging at home, or eczema and psoriasis, menopausal women. And so that we wouldn't be caught in the crosshairs of our current business. And we really buckled down and really an inventory of what we do well and what we do less well, and focused on taking the best of Procter and the best of entrepreneurs and trying to create a win-win situation.
Can you walk us through a sort of a typical, it probably isn't a typical life cycle of a partnership with a startup, but can you pick one out of the air perhaps and kind of walk us through that to help us to understand the mechanics of those relationships?
So we have no two partnerships are alike. So I've been in P&G Ventures since the beginning, and it's amazing. I've been involved in probably 13 very different types of partnerships. No two contracts have been alike. One of the things we had to learn how to do was write contracts fast, because the burn rate for a startup is really high. And so they can't afford the timelines that Big Co tends to work towards. But so like one of our partnerships, which you saw in the video, which was Metaderm, it's a really interesting startup in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that had some really unique technology. And the scientist, Mike Santello, you saw there, is a very well-known immunologist who had done work at Johns Hopkins. And so when he found this ingredients, or actually set of ingredients that were natural based, he really put them through a pharma-like qualification to show that they worked. However, he had the product for sale on Amazon, and it was just stagnant. He couldn't figure out how to get it to the next level. So when we started working with Mike, he had technology that we just thought was amazing. He had great science, he had good IP, but we thought we could help with our marketing arm. What actually we did more than learning about how to better market. And we had some ups and downs because we thought, we know Amazon, we can do it. We didn't, we couldn't. And we just had a really great trusting partnership where he owned the business, but we helped him figure out how to market, and we lost half the business in one day and then we double it the next. We were just really learning with him, and we really figured out what the sweet spot was for him and his consumer. And that was the way he was connecting with the consumer, very on a personal level, very one-on-one level. And we had to figure out how you then scale that beyond a small business to a larger business. And so that was some of the work we did with him. He didn't have really great quality control in place. And so we took the best of Procter to help him do quality control and have high throughput systems and really understand supply chain and all that kind of stuff. So that's one. Another one would be Zevo. Zevo is an insecticide that really serves as sweet spot. So Metaderm serves a sweet spot of RX-like performance without having to have an RX. Metaderm is the sweet spot of safe and effective. We knew that the bug world and insecticide world was effective, but a lot of people were afraid of the warning statements on the back of their can. But really, the naturals don't work. And we found this we found an original Zevo started because an ex-P&Ger from Gillette came to P&G, said he had a trap that tracked bugs. And so we tested it and tried it, and we learned, and it was effective, but not as effective as we needed to be. But we also, in that process, learned that we needed a spray. And so we found this technology of somebody that was selling B2B. And we were able to then take the technology, improve the spray. The spray was a little bit wet. Improve the spray, improve the branding, figure out how to get it in food, drug, mass, which he did not have access to. And it's really been a growing brand for us. So you can see right now we have a joint development agreement with them. So as you can see, we have licensing, we have joint development, we have acquisition. We've had all different kinds of partnerships with various folks along the way. And we continue to do that kind of work.
With your group being 5 years old at this point, have you had time to get from new or newish to big?
None of them would be Procter big, but they're all growing. Like Zevo, I would say if you're an entrepreneur, you'd be pretty pumped. And Metaderm is now called Bodewell. We learned that there was trademarking issues, and that's growing. It's growing nicely. We have another one called Kindra. That's growing nicely. So they're all growing nicely. They are all in build phase. We use a 4-phase process of discover, create, build, and scale. Procter & Gamble is designed for scale. We develop a lot of very high quality products very fast so that we can drive economy and get a good value to the consumer. It's not necessarily designed for non-scale. And that was a lot of the learning we had to have, is how do we right size our processes and then basically fix them for a small company. And so those four, there's another one called Opte. Those four are doing really well. And you would say that those four are, definitely on their way towards a scale world.
Great. And you mentioned learnings, and I think it'd be great to hear more about some of the learnings you've had along the way. But we have a question that came in from Jose. Jose, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Yes, hi, Lawrence. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, everybody. I'm wondering, what is the rate of success that you have when you select the people or the company that you would like to help?
So we're still learning. Our goal is to have higher than the street, obviously. We've learned a lot about what makes a successful partnership and what makes a less successful partnership. And that's still in the learning process, so I don't have those exact numbers. But some of the things we've learned was for P&G, we need to have some sort of what we call moat, which is think about the castle and the water around the castle. That's an IP, that's a trademark. Supplier exclusivity. It doesn't have to be all of those things. So what are those things you can do that make you unique and not close followers? Because we're looking to get $1 billion, right? Obviously not with just that one item, but we're looking for a hero brand, a hero item, a hero technology, a hero brand idea that can then eventually we can grow and get to $1 billion globally. And so that has been probably the biggest learning we've had that works well with us. We also have learned that we need to provide some value, that we need to be able to use, what we've learned over the 180 years to provide value to that company, whether that's supply chain, market research, R&D technology. I do a lot of credentialing and communications. That's really my role right now. And so that's been a big thing for us. So we tend to be not successful when we are out of our sweet spot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to type them into the chat or wave your hand. We've got callers from all over the world right now, the Netherlands and Zurich, Vienna, North Carolina, and elsewhere.
Yeah, so you asked about speed.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I was going to ask about the learnings.
Yeah, one of the big learning we have was, not only being very clear on what we wanted to focus on, we learned that we had to understand what are those spaces we needed to focus on. So Jose, that's probably one of the other things we learned was we needed to create certain expertise that we didn't have within the company. And so that we had to then really be clear and focused. So aging at home has been a big area for us that we've had to gain a lot of expertise in. So think about aging at home as everything from de-risk showering, could be incontinence, it could be hydration, it could be, what are those things that allow consumers to, stay at home where they want to be. Interesting thing about aging, like 80% of the funding right now and the research in aging is for institutional aging. And yet if you ask a consumer, they want to be at home. So that was one of the things. We have like 6 spaces we really focus on, and we have areas that we have ongoing projects and partnerships within those spaces to try to understand how to bring this to the next level. The other area we need to learn how to do is become faster, things like contracts. They don't have the lawyers and the time that P&G does. So we needed to have the speed and ability to work closely with these partners so that we didn't provide an excessive burn rate to them. Every month, every day to them is the day they need to get paid. So we didn't want to keep them hanging. Understanding where we have exclusivity and not exclusivity. We don't need to have everything every time, which has been a big one. Really understanding what the partner needs. We really have decided every conversation we start with, like we do our consumer research. What do you need? What are you looking for? What would make your life better? That's a piece of it externally. Internally, as I said, we had to learn how to do contracts faster and right-sized. We have something called the Speed Team, which is a group of people that take these processes, POs. right? So our purchase orders and were slow. Our terms are really long. Well, we can't have that for a one-person company. It's not appropriate. So we were able to work with our purchasing organization and create the right kind of purchasing terms for small companies or companies that are less fluid. We've learned how to have better conversations and where to be. We've learned how to pay people faster. So those have been we weren't initially at P&G allowed to have hands-on keyboard. We weren't allowed to buy our own ads, right? So we couldn't do this simulation within P&G. And we've been able to figure out how to create special training, and certain people are now allowed to do that because there's risk. There's risk with all that. You don't want to violate privacy. You don't want to, you need to follow the criteria and the regulatory and the laws. And we have systems at Procter to help us not break those, right? And so when you're bringing it in-house, you have to become experts in-house. So we've learned a lot.
You have some more questions?
This is an open. I mean, are you applying like crowdsourcing approach, or you are waiting that the people approach to you, or you are more aggressive? I mean, how do you both? Okay.
So my team runs a bunch of things to try to attract entrepreneurs. We have social media. We have a website that we're constantly updating and redoing. We have innovation challenges to drive awareness of what we're looking for. More than, we've found some really nice partners that way, but that the goal is really to drive awareness of what we're looking for to do. And even some of the non-finalists we've spoken to them about potential partnership. We also have scouts that go out and are very, very active in the field. They're in, where entrepreneurs are. We have friendships with VCs and big accelerators that push people to us. And then we have different systems that actually crawl the web and look for people looking to do this kind of work. And we have, active PR, active media work. So it's a both and.
And how do you approach how do you tackle that issue, that approach or outreach everybody? Do you define a challenge and you start to look at in the whole world something that is someone that is working in that specific challenge, or you go to regions and you say, okay, what is happening in this region? Oh, maybe this technology could be useful. Which approach do you use?
Both. So we look for technology everywhere. So we do most of our initial product testing or like business testing in the US or China, two biggest markets for us. But the plan is that it would be global everywhere. But the technology and the partnerships have been global. They've been one person in their garage, and they've been, 20 people who actually have a company, right? So, or 50 people with a company. We do innovation challenges, as I said, with very specific briefs. Those briefs actually live on our website. So those are something we have. We have a thesis of what we're looking for. So, and we also have an area called emerging frontiers, because you never know what can be serendipitous, right? Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, but we have like criteria, like I said, we want moat. We want the startup to understand what they're trying to learn. We did a big survey with initially just 30 and then grew to 60 different startups. And when you ask them what they need, they always say money. And then you say, what do you need money for? Well, often it's to do this, to do supply chain, but they don't have expertise in that area. So they're inefficient in those areas where they need money for, right? Now, sometimes they need money because they need employees or whatever. And frankly, they're usually better in performance marketing than we are at this point in time in DTC, direct to consumer. But so what we do is then, really when they understand what they need and what they want, it's a really great situation. Just like we had a reflect of what we were good at doing and what we needed, we find that works better as well.
Thanks, Jose. Got another question coming in from Ivan. Ivan, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, just actually, you hear me?
Yes.
You can.
By the way, I'm a former P&G guy, and I'm worked in Germany. I had a question regarding your international aspect, but you did answer between China and the US. What about Israel? What about Europe with Germany, UK, France, or wherever? Is there any interest there, or is it at the point in time today mostly US and China?
So from a technology point of view, we've we're looking everywhere. Actually, we have a big innovation challenge that just launched this week for Israel. We're finding a lot of amazing technology there. We had a program in Europe for a while. We still do, right? We did something with Imperial College. We have scouts that look for stuff across pan-Europe, through some of our other networking systems. So from a technology point of view, we're looking everywhere. From a testing with the business model, with the consumer, right now, we just uniquely do that in US and China with the expectations to expand globally, just like all of our other businesses.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Sophia?
Ivan. Another question coming in from Fabiana.
I'm trying to find faces.
Got a lot of them here. Fabiana,
Fabiana.
Would you like to come on, or would you like me to ask your question?
Oh, you're on mute, or you can't hear you. No, you're not on mute.
For a minute. Okay.
No, unfortunately, the sound doesn't seem to be coming through, Fabiana.
I'll go ahead and ask that. I'll go ahead and ask the question here. The question is, how do you manage explore and exploit when interacting with the startups? Are those terms that you use internally, Lauren? Explore and exploit?
No.
I think that typically refers to exploit is optimizing the core business, whereas explore is moving into completely new areas of business.
So with a startup, we stay within their lane, right? So if they're, like, as I said, Mike Santello had this technology, this company that focused on eczema and psoriasis. And so we really focused our work with him on serving those consumers with eczema and psoriasis before we got distracted him on how we could expand the technology into new areas. That is creep is one of our challenges at P&G. And so we are very disciplined not to get scope creep, because it's not fair to the startup, because they don't have this bandwidth and the time and money to deal with our ability to do scope creep. So we stay very clear with LOPAs. We use lean principles with clear objectives of things we need to test, or clear challenges we need to test. And then we meter funding on our projects against those ability to get to those levels. And so once we get there, then we would maybe ask another set of questions, but we're usually really clear up front on what we expect to see from our startups or our partners in order to get to the next level. And then we lay that all out. Like, we don't just lead them along. We kind of say, okay, let's get to this level, and then we can invest at this level for us to get to that next level, if that makes sense. Thank you. I can see you nodding.
Thanks, Fabiana. Christina, we have a question from Christina.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Thanks for all the insights, Lauren. It's really useful. So I'm trying to understand how this two-way collaboration between P&G and a startup is working out. You kind of touched on my question just now about looking for clear objectives, clear challenges, but I'm just trying to figure out what is really the incentive for a startup to work with P&G. Obviously, is all the resources and access to these things, but I see that it always has to make sense for both parties, right? It has to make sense incentives wise. So what are the criteria that deem that now a collaboration, a partnership is completed? Or do you have that? Or maybe you still keep renewing your partnership with them based on new requests or new challenges, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think we can answer that question a couple ways. I think for the partners that I was talking about, like the Metaderms and this Mike Santello, which is House Pharmaceuticals, we've ended up in a, really nice agreement with them, like a licensing agreement, and, who knows what will happen in the future. So for him, he was able then, let me step back. What we learned about entrepreneurs is they aren't only in it for the money, right? Money is always a driver, of course, because you want to be successful financially, but they also, particularly a lot of times they want its reputation. A lot of times they know what they're really good at doing and they want to move on to the next thing and the next thing for them. And so, a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to be the one that grows their business to a certain level. And a lot of them know that they don't have the capability. They know what they're really good at doing. I talked to a couple not so recently, and he's like, I am a PhD scientist. I'm a really good scientist, but I just designed this package and even I know it's not good, right? So like they can't get on store shelf. Like they don't know how to do DCC. Quality control they've never worked with an external supplier. They've never done that contract manufacturing. They've never figured out how to write criteria for their raw materials. And so they know what they're really good at doing and they need help in the areas they're not really good. And then the exit thing for a lot of them, as I said, with several of them, we have joint development agreements. So they're still working with us on the next big thing. Others, they've either wanted to sell it out completely or they license the agreement and we move forward. So I think there is not one path. And I think that was big, important learning for us. There is just not one path for all people. And, we're B2B, but we're really human to human because these are small companies. When I was working with big chemical companies, that's like a bunch of people with contracts and purchasing, but these are people, right? So we need to understand what makes them happy and what motivates them. And then we need to work with them as people to make sure that it's successful for both parties.
Thanks, Christina. Time went by quickly. We're almost at the end of our session. It flew right by, but I think we have time for one last question. Andreas, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's just a question. I'm used from innovation on a methodology to spot innovation areas strategically and then focus on them. Is that the same way as you approach and identify startup partners, that you have an overall strategy which is guiding and you say this is a sort of company we are looking for or rather not? Or is it just that you spot opportunities and this strategy is along the way created, you could say?
So Andreas, we do both, right? So I keep on saying both. I feel like that's a theme. So we definitely have 6 spaces that we're very focused on finding technologies or partnerships or businesses that are solving consumer pain points in those 6 spaces. And we have that kind of laid out. But then we do keep one we call emerging frontiers because we were learning that we just never knew what we would learn. Yeah. And so our last innovation challenge, the winner of the innovation challenge was a product that was food preservation. Well, that isn't one of our spaces, but it's really interesting, right? So I don't know if we're going to pursue it or not. That's not, but it's like, so we want to keep our mind open to what's possible, keeping the criteria we know it is successful for us.
Yeah, super. Thanks.
Yeah, it did go by
so if
quickly.
You know technologies or people potentially for us to partner with us, please follow us on Twitter at PGV Studio or on LinkedIn at P&G Venture Studio. And all our information comes out on those 2 places.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone, for participating today. This is an area with obviously of greatly increasing interest in the world. It's also an area with a lot of mystique surrounding it. So candid sessions like this are especially valuable. So very much appreciate your time and insights, Lauren. Thanks to everyone for joining us. I think this is the last session of the day. So we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.